Is it happy dog time? Oh, yeah. I'm done crying. I'm gonna wipe the tears out of my eyes and clean my pants and go home like a man. Alright guys, this is all the engine parts that I had thrown in a bucket from where I tore it down. I think that's all the little parts and washers out of the bucket there. By the way, how's my thumb look? Look at that. That's the thumb I smashed doing the swing arm bearings the other day. We gotta sort all this stuff out. You got the governor for the power valve right there. Before I install it, I'll double check the orientation of that thrust bearing. That goes in the right side engine case. Here's a clutch spring. I don't know why that's there. It should be in the sync with the clutch parts. Here's a primary and primary washer. This washer's got to go the right way, guys. It's very conical. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but it's not flat. It's very coned. And it's supposed to convex up, not concave up. It's not supposed to go that way, if you can see that in the camera. It's supposed to go that way. You're supposed to apply a lot of force in the center and have it spread the load out over this primary drive gear. So that also, like the governor, goes on the right side of the engine, outside where you put the cases together. Here's 3 little washers and circlips. These 2 I think are for the water pump. I gotta look and see what this little doodad does. Here's the water pump impeller. I was going to replace this, but it looks so good, I don't see anything wrong with it. The reason the engine had water problems had nothing to do with the water pump. The reason the guy had water problems or coolant problems with the engine was because he didn't have a base gasket. So here's the shift forks, 2 on 1. So there's the shift fork on the short shaft. There's my drum. I looked at all these grooves, guys. They look good. I know I already said that in the videos before, but you know what you're looking for here, what you're looking for in these little grooves is little white spots, little high wear spots where these forks ride in there like so. As you rotate this drum by, you know, the shift device on your connected to your foot pedal, as this rotates around, it makes this shift fork slide up and down on the shaft. Well, you get wear here. There is a little bit of wear there, but that's normal wear. I mean, they're all going to have some wear after you ride them. But what you're looking for is a round nub. You don't want flat spots on the sides. It's got a lot of flat spots where it's been rubbing in the trough, rubbing in that little trench there, and you got problems. And if you got rounded off metal inside your trenches, you got problems. Because what that'll do is that'll cause the fork to be sloppy in there. And then you get, you know, that's when bikes skip out of gear and all that. You have all that kind of trouble. So here's the spring for the Kickstarter. That's also right side engine stuff that happens after the case. Here's one of my transmission shafts complete. I already went through it and inspected all the dogs. What you're looking for here, guys, you do not want the engagement dogs to have a lot of rounded off corners. See how that's a nice rectangle? It goes up, it goes across, and it goes down. You don't see rounded off corners on it. When you see rounded off corners there, here, I'll just go ahead and pull this apart. If you see rounded off corners there, then that means it's tearing these edges up in here. So that's the male, there's the female, okay? You want flat edges. If you got rounded off corners, then when that male and that female are engaged, when you're riding and you apply a lot of throttle and there's a lot of torque and thrust, those rounded corners can cause the gears to skip out like that. It'll go skip, skip, and it'll be happening while you're riding. So you want nice flat edges in there with good engagement. And that's what I see. So that shaft's complete. It's got the, you know, washers and circlips are all correct. That side of the trans is ready to go. This one fell apart in the jug, in the bucket, the Home Depot bucket there. I'm missing a washer for the end of that. But same thing, I looked at these dogs here, and they're all in good shape. So this transmission is pleasantly, surprisingly, in really good shape. This looks like the washer that fits on the end of it. Let's see which way it faces. You can tell from the score marks on the washer which way it faces. See that pattern? That correlates to either the bearing or edges that rub. See how that's got a nice smooth wide spread load on it? That's because it runs against a bearing that's spinning with it. See how this side has 4 or 5 distinct different rings of scoring marks on it? That's because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different levels of metal and heights of metal in there rubbing around on it. So that washer obviously goes on in that direction. And then this side here butts right up into a bearing with no washer. That side's designed to just mate up into a bearing. And of course, they mate like that. And that's how they go. This is your clutch basket that comes off the primary. As this turns, it turns your counter shaft, and that turns your front sprocket, which drives a chain and turns your rear sprocket. So the transmission goes in like that. This is some kind of a water pump gear, I think. This is some kind of an idler gear for the kickstart shaft that's got a washer going to it. That's right side engine stuff that happens after we put the cases together. That's what I'm sorting here, guys. I'm trying to sort all the stuff that goes in the right side of the engine after I put the cases together, which is everything from my hand to the right that you see here, versus stuff that I got to put inside the cases when I first put them together, like transmission parts. There's a water pump seal here. This is the clutch seal for the clutch actuator that goes in the left crankcase. I'll put that in. Here's the governor. I took this apart already when I took it out of the bike and inspected it before I got my parts order together. And I'm not going to take it all apart again because it's correct and it works. Honestly, guys, really, if you don't know how to work on these, you probably shouldn't mess with it. Just buy a new one. They're not that expensive, and if you don't know what you're doing with that, you can really mess them up. So I'll put that there. That's not me copping out of it. It's just, you know, they either work or they don't, and if they're worn out enough to be a problem, replace it. There's not really much you're going to do at home to fix it. Alright, so that's a right side part. That's a right side part. That's a right side shift pawl part. Here's the little pawl that locates in that pin, like that. This nut and bolt, what does this do? Oh, that goes with this. Here's an old crank seal that I'm not reusing. Here's my shift pawl parts. See that dowel pin? Very important on the transmission that the selector, okay, that's the bolt that holds it all together. This little female is designed for that male right there. It's very important that that mates up like that. If it doesn't, you are never going to line your transmission up right, and you'll have all kind of problems. So if you've looked at everything else 10 times over and you just can't get it all together right, look at that. Alright, here's the other crank seal I'm not reusing. Okay. Shift pawl part that goes on the right side of the engine. Oh, look at that little piece of metal came out of there. We'll wipe that off on a rag. We don't want to put that little piece of metal in. Here's the actuator that goes with that seal on the left crankcase. We'll put them aside for now. This was the old water pump seal that we're not reusing. This is a big dowel pin for the center of the cases. I'll put that with the trans parts because that's got to go in during case assembly. Oh wait, here's a fourth little spacer. Oh yeah, there's another one. No, that's a dowel pin. That's a dowel pin. That's not a dowel pin, that's a spacer. I forgot where this went. It went somewhere in the cases. We'll find it later. Here's the shift rod that goes across. The clutch rod that goes across. A lot of these clutches, guys, got to watch. There's a ball bearing. It either rests between here and here, or it rests inside of a closed shaft, or more commonly, this pushes on that. Yamaha likes to do this a lot, and then they put a ball on the other end before the thrust bearing on the clutch pressure plate. Make sure you don't have any ball bearings that are supposed to go with this rod. If you put the bike all back together and you can't get the right amount of clutch free play no matter what you do with the cable, make sure you didn't leave a ball bearing out. Look on your parts fiche, look in your service manual, see if it's supposed to have a ball bearing, and make sure it's in there. This Suzuki design was manufactured a little cheaper with a little less sophistication. Okay, this rod just rides in there like that. When you pull the clutch lever, it just pulls this. It pushes this across the engine, and then, you know, of course, goes through here, and then it comes out the other side and pushes the thrust bearing on the clutch. So make sure all that's cleaned up and free with no debris in it. Here's the plate for the pawl mechanism. If y'all don't know what this is, you need to turn this video off right now and go watch yoga or something. Alright, here's the other part of your kick shaft. See that? Kick shaft parts. This goes in like that some kind of way or another, and that spring goes on there. Here's the shift pawl parts. There's two little springs that go with that. Let's hope we didn't lose them. Here's one. See that little spring? Maybe the other one's still in the cam. Yep, the other one's still in the cam. See how this side the spring fell out, and this side the spring's still in the little hole. So there's the other spring. We're good to go. And these are the little pins, or the little caps that the springs push on. They work on the pawl. I'll show you how to assemble that later. Here's one of the recessed screws for that. That should get a little touch of blue Loctite on it when you put it back together. This is what this spacer's for, I think. I think there's a longer bolt and a longer spacer for that, and then a shorter one goes on the other side, something like that. We'll get to that part later. This bearing is for a water pump, I think. This is a kick shaft hold down. This is also a kick shaft hold down, and they go on the right side of the case after the cases are joined, so that'll go on the right side parts there like that. I forget where this circlip went. Looks pretty big and gnarly. It's probably the one that held the front sprocket on. Yeah, look how rusty and gunky it is. It's definitely not lived inside of clean oil all its life. I'm gonna say that's for the front sprocket. There's a dowel pin. I'm gonna say that's for the front sprocket, and there's the new one I bought. Okay, this circlip looks like idler gear. And where did we put our idler gear? I know we had one laying around here. There's the water pump gear, primary gear, governor gear. There's my idler. There's the idler gear right there, up there out of the way. Put that circlip with that. Probably should have got a new one. Professional practice would dictate a new circlip there. I didn't do it. We're going to reuse it. This spring here is for the shift pawl. I'll show you later how to assemble it, but it hooks in with those parts. And here's two little screws that look like they hold a bearing down somewhere or another. Yeah, not exactly sure if I remember where they go, but we'll find out as we go. We'll look through the cases and make sure we know where everything goes. So my main focus right now is to get this seal installed on the left crankcase before we join the cases and put the trans together, just so it's done. Get the water pump completely taken care of and installed, because once the cases are together I can't work on that. It's an internal water pump. So I gotta go look at a parts fiche and see, you know, which way these bearings and impellers go. If I had to recall, or if I had to guess just from experience and knowledge, I would say that you have an impeller that goes through a seal. Behind that seal is a bearing, and then on the other end there's a bearing which is probably still in the crankcase, and then these three washers do something, and circlips. Again, we should have got a new circlip and didn't. Okay, so professional knowledge would dictate you're going to have a seal behind the impeller like that. It's got to ride in a bearing, and the bearing's obviously going to be behind the seal, because you can't have water in the bearing. This needs to live in oil, right? So if this seal separates water and oil, it's going to be next to the impeller, and the oil is going to be on this side of the shaft, and the water is going to be on this side of the shaft, so the impeller can pump the water. And then I just got to see what order the other bearing goes in, what happens with these washers and circlips. I see that flat surface there, I see that keyed weight there. My guess is this goes on like that, and I don't see any circlip situation there, so that probably just rides in a case bearing or something.